Hi, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to the best day ever. We are here today to talk about Greta Gerwig's visionary, culturally impactful, poignant, and just damn fun Barbie. Barbie is the #1 film at the box office this year, now with $1.436 billion as it heads into its 11th weekend in cinemas. I have the extreme honor to be joined by an esteemed panel, a team from the production, award winners and nominees all. Some of their credits alongside Barbie include the Harry Potter and Paddington franchises, Darkest Hour, Atonement, Beauty and the Beast, Saltburn, and the upcoming Wonka. So we're going to bring them out to the stage. I want you all to give them a warm, Kenergized welcome. So let's start with producer David Heyman. Next up, we have production designer Sarah Greenwood. Followed by VFX supervisor Glenn Pratt. Hair and makeup supervisor Ivana Primorak. Hair and makeup designer, forgive me. Nina Rice, who is production sound mixer. And Jacqueline Duran, who is costume designer. Welcome, everybody. Yeah. So before we get chatting with these guys, we're going to run a behind-the-scenes clip from Barbie.
Barbie Land is perfect, and everything in it is perfect, and you have perfect day after perfect day until you don't.
In a way, Barbie Land is a world without aging, it's a world without death, it's a world without mistakes.
Walking into those environments and feeling the kind of artistry and the love and the playfulness, it was so exciting.
It's just eye candy, and it's so fun to look at, but it's also beautiful, genuinely beautiful. And there's such craftsmanship and such artistry in all of it. I felt like I was a miniature little doll in the real dream houses.
One of the wonderful things about shooting here on all these big sound stages is that we were able to really create that world.
The fact that all of this is practical and has been built does a lot for the cast. Walking on and seeing, wow, this is really the world.
This isn't like any cul-de-sac that I've ever been on. It's very, very pink. It's a little bit more pink than I've ever seen in my life, but I love just how like glittery and sparkly it is.
I didn't realize so many shades of pink existed in the world, but everything is beautiful and everything looks perfectly plastic and perfectly fake.
It's all true to its own universe and so distinct from the real world.
We had a vision of old filmmaking techniques, and as reference points, we watched a lot of old movie musicals.
I love the sort of interiority of those musicals and how they are authentically artificial, that they have this heightened emotionality that comes from its artificiality.
Greta coined the term authentically artificial, that it feels like an authentic world with its own rules, but these people are authentic and they're feeling real things.
I'm such a huge fan of Greta's and her work. She's so smart and deep in everything she does, so everything from the script to the sets to the wardrobe to the props, she is one of a kind, and it's such a singular vision which she's created.
She's just the best. I love her so much. She is one of the very few auteurs of our generation, and it's why I wanted to work with her.
Greta's enthusiasm is just completely contagious. And when she started describing these ideas that I read on the script, the way she described them to me was just wonderful.
A big part of it was making sure that I didn't let the adult part of my brain take over and run the show, that I was like, what did the little girl want? Iridescent purple and brighter pink.
Pink is a major part of the design.
We tweaked and created this look of table, and then everybody could choose or adapt colors to make sure that they look pleasing. And indeed, the colors look beautiful.
A lot of it was inspired by old Slim Aaron's pictures and that 1970s Palm Springs sort of kind of vibe of leisure and clean lines.
beautiful people in beautiful places doing beautiful things. That was the mantra. That's the essence of Barbie.
Toy was a big aspect of the design. Greta always said, I want people to watch this and feel like they can reach in and touch it or pick it up, because that's the world of Barbie and toys.
We are in a giant toy box, and this is the toy box, and this is the toy world, and they are dolls.
Welcome to Barbie's Dream House. Come on in.
Congratulations, everybody, on just a phenomenal success. David, you joined the project actually a little bit late, right? Was that born out of your previous collaborations with Greta?
I've only worked with Greta once before, and that was on White Noise.
Right.
I'd worked with Noah, and I'd worked with Margot. And I think a combination of those relationships, and I worked at Warner Brothers too, they asked me to join, and I'm very grateful they did. It's been really one of the highlights of my career. Just the best time working with the most incredible artists in front of and behind the camera. And the thing about Greta, and I'm sure everybody will echo this, is she is the most inclusive, enthusiastic, inspiring person to work with. It's such a pleasure. So, yeah. And
it looks like, just from everybody, we've seen this behind-the-scenes stuff, the clip of the I'm Just Ken making of that's been online. It just looked like so much fun. Did you guys have just a fantastic time? Was it really that fun?
The best. That's incredible.
I think every day you just go onto these sets and you just be like, this is absolutely incredible. And the dance numbers, all of it was a real joy to be part of.
Yeah. And Sarah, speaking of the sets and this all of this design, I recall with Jacqueline when we talked about Beauty and the Beast several years ago, there was an element of this broad canvas and kind of having to rein yourselves in a little bit. Now, this seemed to have endless possibilities. So how did you sort of manage that?
Well, I think it was first of all the most incredible script. That when I read it, it was a massive stream of consciousness. There were no scene breaks or anything, and it was just like, what is this, and how are we going to untangle this and make it into? And talking to Greta about how we're going to make it work was just a fascinating kind of 6-9 months before we actually started on pre-production. It was an amazing philosophical, intellectual, and very funny journey. It was just brilliant. It was just talking to Greta, once or twice a week was just, highlight really. So. Yeah.
Were there any inspirations that might kind of surprise people about, for the houses, for Barbie Land, for?
I think one of the main things was, obviously we have this incredible kind of legacy, which is Mattel, which we dived into, and we looked at all the kind of, mainly we looked at the dream houses, and from the start in the 60s where there were little cardboard cutouts, which were my personal favourite, but, right up to contemporary times. And we bought one. It was my first ever dream house. We bought it and we had it in the office and we played with it. And then it was kind of then just trying to work out what made it toy. And that was part of the conversation with Greta. What is it that makes these characters toy? And that was about scale, and it was about the space, and it was about, working it out that it was, small. It was 23% smaller, is to be specific, which is why when you try and put your Barbie in the car, she never quite fits, and so we've made that, and then it was also about what made it toy, and it was kind of like, and it was taking it apart, and it was kind of like the space around it, around people, around the objects, so it was kind of cleaning it up, I suppose, is the kind of what we did. Yeah.
That issue, the question of scale, just fascinated me. Just watching the film, and Glenn, in terms of, there's a lot of practical effects. There's a lot of in-camera. Can you talk about particularly the montages that we see when they're traveling from Barbie Land to the real world and then back. How you kind of worked with those, and maybe what were the differences between working in Barbie Land and then when you get to the real world?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that, as Sarah was just talking about, was built pieces. So it was very much the idea that these were these tangible set pieces that we could all walk onto and just, you appreciate that sort of wonder of, wow, look at this. So that was definitely Greta's goal. And I think from the beginning, working with Rodrigo, we sort of figured out, helped Sarah and the art department figure out dimensions and how big these pieces needed to be. And also working with SFX, special effects, figuring out for them where the size of the rigs they needed, all of those sort of key bits that made this sequence work. So there was, from a very technical point of view, the actors had to remain a certain distance from lens, so everything sort of had to fall back from that. So visual effects were involved in sort of planning that process from sort of early doors when we first came up with the ideas and the concepts with Sarah and working with Greta and Rodrigo. And then when we got into post-production, Greta's idea was really sort of, that we talked about, was extending that world into when we land on Venice Beach.
Right.
And equally when we go back to Venice Beach. So when they leave Venice Beach, when Barbie, Sasha and Gloria travel back to Barbie Land. So the idea there was that Greta really wanted to embrace that flat theatrical language coming back onto Venice Beach, which was just great. And I think it's a really fun moment in the film. You know, it's echoing back to the practical elements that we'd seen earlier.
Right.
So that was the idea there. And then I guess Barbie Land itself, again, there was such strong reference that we got from Sarah and the team that allowed us to extrapolate out and build out these sort of beautiful vistas that sort of still were always maintaining the language that we'd established and working sort of through principal photography.
Right.
So we sort of just continued that language on, really.
Now, you mentioned Venice Beach, and Jacqueline, I was going to say, forgive me, there's not a costume, there's not one thing that Margot or any of the Barbies wear in this film that I don't want to own myself, except
you don't
for
want to look like hot skating
Venice, except for that Venice Beach getup.
That was Hot Skating Barbie, and that was one of the hardest ones to actually pin down, because we needed a costume that would make Margot and Ken look extraordinary on Venice Beach. And actually that's quite hard, because that's the nature of Venice Beach. So it was really quite tricky, and we went through lots of different permutations, and in the end, you know, the thing was to go back to Mattel, the history of Mattel, and find something, look at all the rollerblading costumes they'd ever made, and then reinterpret Hot Skating Barbie.
Right.
And make one for Ken. So yeah, it was fun.
Hot damn. And in terms of the evolution, though, I mean, she does go through an evolution costume-wise, and Ivana, this is also sort of for you in terms of, you know, the hair and makeup and taking something that's a doll, but, you know, applying it to this. I just wondered, you know, and also that transition from Barbie Land to the real world. If both of you could maybe address a little bit how you.
Go first.
Sarah mentioned that we went through the whole journey of research and discovery of our rules, and that was really important in this process, because we discovered that each Barbie and every single individual Barbie is the best version of herself. So every single one had to be fitted and created individually. There was nothing uniformed about it, apart from some of the rules that we discovered, like the hair had to be more magnificent than in real life, has to be wider than than their shoulders, for example.
Okay.
Completely always ties in with costume, because it was always set and designed to go with each individual costume change. So that meant that Barbie Margot had more than 30, I think, in the end, different costume changes and hair changes. And each individual Barbie and Ken was designed according to their costumes and their changes. So we follow those rules of creating the best version of each Barbie and Ken. And that was the rule. So we had to create as many versions of each costume as possible, and that created that world. But then it had to be very, very natural and beautiful, like the way it would appear in each child's memory.
Right.
And so that was our kind of task.
When you say rules, who was dictating those rules?
The rules were dictated by all of us filmmakers together. By discovering what makes Barbie world, we set those rules for ourselves. Like, for example, scale.
Okay.
So scale of the how tall is the ceiling in a dream house,
Right.
how big is the car, also affected how wide is and how long is their hair. So everything was slightly strange. And so if the skirt came up to a certain length, then the hair went down a bit too low and was too long and too wide, and always wider than the shoulders.
Right.
But yet up here, and how it kind of came out of everyone's head had to be beautiful and natural.
Okay.
So those were the rules that we all set for ourselves and followed.
And speaking of hair, I don't think it was bigger at any moment than during the big dance sequence, right?
Yeah.
And so Nina, talking about those kinds of like expansive scenes and whatnot, the dance scene as well. In terms of capturing the audio and the dialogue, how did you work towards that, or handle that really, and master that? And also, were there other challenges when you're in the real world?
Yeah, the minute you step onto the set, these dream houses are so tall and open.
Right.
And my first thing was, hi, are my boom ups going to boom the scenes up there? But we worked with the stunts department, and they were harnessed in, and they absolutely loved it because it wasn't their average day on set.
Right.
And moving on to the big dance number, we talked about how, because there's dialogue intertwined throughout the whole dance,
Right.
how we're going to do it, how we're going to capture the dialogue clean. So we collaborated closely with lovely hair and makeup department and costume, and sewed the radio mics into wigs, into the hair, and also into the costumes, so they were tight and they wouldn't move around. And also the cast were an absolute joy to work with. So we gave them an earpiece as well, which had the music track on it, and to the dancers that were in shot as well. And then they were able to keep in time with the music, hear it, and then we'd be able to capture the performance clean, and it was great,
It
and
worked.
It worked really
It's
well, yeah.
one of my favorite scenes in the movie. Do you guys, this is just for everybody, and maybe you knew it going in, but was there a moment, one day when you just knew you had something that was just extraordinary?
Every day was extraordinary. Every day was hard and extraordinary, full of challenges, and we literally went through the schedule and through the film that way. I mean, I remember at one point that dance sequence was going to be in the first week of our schedule, and I think we all sort of thought how we could do that, and then somehow we did.
I think, you read the script. I think one of the reasons the film has worked is it's original. And when you read the script, I'd never read anything like it. And I think there's a real hunger for originality. And then you have a singular artist in Greta Gerwig who who is always pushing the limit of what's possible in the most inclusive and collaborative way. She brought along the most incredible artists to collaborate with her. And then what the film is about, it's not about meaning, but thematically it is so rich. And above all, it's really moving and a whole lot of fun. And I think that when you're around it, and when we were making it, that fun exuded. I mean, I know it was challenging. I know it was at times felt impossible. But there was the spirit of of fun and that really permeated each and every day. And I do think that stemmed from our writer-director, Greta Gerwig.
Do you think it says anything about? I mean, it also seemed to just come at the perfect time, and I mean, it again, it was such a joy to cover the box office, every day for all of this time. But does it say something also for you about female-led films in the future?
Well, when we were getting the film greenlit, one of the challenges was comps. There were no comps, and I think, of course, there are 51% of the population of the world is women. Of course, there should be more films for women. It's undeniable. But those films have to be original, and those films have to be exceptional. And I think that's an expectation, not just as film for women, but films for men. And what I love about Barbie is there's nothing like it.
Right. Extraordinary, completely unique. Thank you, everyone. That's all the time we have. I really appreciate you being here.